Welcome back to my channel. I'm Hannah Blackwell, and today I'm going to be sharing with you magical romantasy books with enchanted forest settings. I'm excited to share with you these fantasy romance books that all have magical, ethereal, enchanted forest settings, and they're going to really put you in a whole new magical world where everything is going to be enchanted and romantic and just basically wonderful. I feel like this is the time of year that enchanted forests are like my favorite settings. I haven't really seen any recommendations like this, and this is just the kind of thing I love to read. So if you're interested in fantasy romance books that put you in an enchanted magical world, then stick right here and I'm going to be sharing some wonderful recommendations with you. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into this recommendation list. The first book I'm going to recommend to you is going to be Heart of the Fae by Emma Hamm. I read this book about 2 years ago and absolutely adored it. This is about Sorsha, and in her village, everyone is getting sick and she is trying to tend to those around her. She's working at a brothel but as a midwife, and she has to leave her father who's really sick because she needs to find a way to save her village and her father. She goes into these enchanted woods. She puts an offering to the Fae because she's one of the last people there that really still believe in the Fae. While she's in this magical enchanted forest, they come to her and she's basically sent on a mission to find the forgotten Fae king, and this is a romance between the two of them. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, so already it's got those built-in enchanted magical vibes in the plot. A lot of this takes place in an enchanted forest, and then when she does go to see the king, there is like enchanted lands and enchanted forest type of vibes around that area too. So this whole thing puts you like into a fairy tale, and I honestly just think it's the perfect book to read if you are looking for these kinds of vibes. This is not super spicy, but it's spicy. I would say maybe like a 2.5 on the spice scale. There's also all kinds of different fae in this book, like brownies and pixies and like seelie and unseelie, and they all have different kinds of powers. It was just really fun. I think Emma Hamm is a wonderful author, and I really want to try more of her works. The next book I'm going to recommend to you is Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh. Book I just read and fell in love with. This is a queer enchanted romance story set in this magical wood, and we have this man, and I don't think we ever really get a clear idea of like what he is. He's some kind of forest being, we'll just say that, and he's like connected to this wood, and there are nymphs in here that become trees, like they plant themselves, that they have these really cool like plant power. It's just intrinsically got those enchanted forest vibes. It's also got a really sweet queer romance in it too. It's not spicy, but it's very sweet, and it's also a novella, so quite a short read. I would say this is also a very cozy book. I would definitely put it into the cozy fantasy category. It just kind of mixes between the two, like romantasy and cozy fantasy. So Tobias is our deity or forest being, and then Silver is this man who comes to visit him, and he's really interested in lore and learning more about the past. His whole family, I guess, studies like lore. Tobias has the nymphs allow him to see him, if that makes sense. And then they develop a relationship and a friendship from there. The people in the nearby village don't know necessarily that Tobias is good. They think there's like a scary man in the woods. One of them shoots him and then kind of feels really bad for it afterwards. And then there is this evil deity that Tobias knows is going to come for Silver. A lot of the book is very ethereal and whimsical, almost like magical realism, to where like you don't know what's real, what's not, and some of it's kind of so metaphorical that you're not sure if it's actually taking place or what is actually taking place. So you have to be ready to not be fully sure what's happening or what's going on when you read this book. I was definitely a little bit confused at times, but I just kind of allowed myself to like go with the flow, and that definitely made me enjoy the story even more. Next I have Scepter by J. Bree. This is the first prequel novella in her new series, and this is a enemies to lovers fantasy romance or romantasy series series that has just begun. So there's 2 novellas and then there's the first full-length novel that's now out. And that's all that's out so far, but more books are coming. So in this one, we're going to be following our heroine, and she is a witch and she lives in this enchanted forest and she does plant magic and practices herbalism. There's like one thing about this book that irked me, but it was a very like personal thing, and it had to do with like the mix up between tinctures and tea. And I know that's so weird, but it kind of irked me. Other than that, I thought this book was a really awesome way to start out a series. So she basically has to escape, and I think she's like with her brother. She is like telecommunicating with her chosen mate, and he wants her to come find him. And we find something out at the end of the story that kind of changes everything. I thought it was a really cool way to set up a fantasy romance. I had a lot of fun with it. I loved the Enchanted Forest setting. The whole thing basically took place in the woods, and I'm very excited to find out what happens next. So I still have to read the next prequel novella, and then I can read the first book. I think it's called A Crown of Oaths and Curses. So the second prequel novella is The Sword, and then I have A Crown of Oaths and Curses, and I think the next book is coming out in August 2024. Next, I have this book that is a fantasy romance about a forest god by Tiffany Roberts. It's called His Darkest Craving. I have not read this one. So that's the first one on this list that I haven't read yet, but I've heard nothing but really, really great things about this book. It's not super long. It's under 300 pages. And like I said, it's a fantasy romance. So this is about Sophie, and she is living at this like secluded cabin in a magical forest. And she starts to notice a dark entity lurking in the shadows. And I think that the hero is some kind of forest god that also has some kind of shadow being attached to him. That's all I know. So I don't know if it's technically MF or if it's MFM or what, but maybe this is just like almost like a Peter Pan in his shadows kind of situation. I'm not quite sure, but I'm intrigued to find out. I think it's supposed to be fairly spicy too, with some trigger warnings. So if you go into this, make sure you check those out. Okay, so the next one that I have not read yet is called Vidios. This is by L.A. Holloway. Technically an alien romance, but it's set on an alien planet where our heroine is in an enchanted forest. She's like a scientist, and she's studying the plants and the mushrooms and stuff of this forest. There's a lot of like scary beings that she knows to kind of be like aware of, but she is captured by this 10-meter tall forest god. I'm thinking like if you've seen Lord of the Rings, like the second book / second movie in that trilogy, I'm thinking of those giant forest tree creatures, or maybe think of like Groot, but even bigger. I don't know how this size difference is going to work, but I'm very intrigued to find out. So definitely magic forest, tree creature, tree giant. Very Enchanted Forest vibes. I think this is going to be fairly spicy, and I think it's also supposed to be very sweet. So obviously trigger warnings for kidnapping, but as far as I know, the hero is a total cinnamon roll. Next, I have Svend the Collector by Denali Day. This is a prequel novella to this whole series that is basically inspired by Norse mythology, and it's about these, well, not dragon riders, but wyvern riders, which is basically a dragon. And so there are these wyvern riders. They're supposed to be very much like barbarian lovers. I'm very interested in continuing on in the series because I loved this prequel novella. This is about our heroine, and she doesn't want to just get married and be a housewife. She wants to continue hunting and doing the outdoor activities that she enjoys doing. She runs off into the forest one day, even though she knows she's not supposed to, because the forest is very dangerous. And lo and behold, a Dokiri wyvern rider swoops down and takes her because he's decided that she is going to be his mate. And it's time for him to go get a mate and bring her back. And that's just what they do, apparently. So he does this, and he's expecting her to be a little bit peeved, but nowhere near as peeved as she is, rightfully so. And they end up going back and forth. They have a total like hate to love situation. She's fighting him. He's kind of amused that she's fighting him. It's a total like culture shock kind of situation. And they have to get out of the forest alone on foot because she is now taking him hostage. It is so fun. So flipping fun. and then they have to like fight the dangers of the forest together. I loved this one. If you're looking for some bickering banter with a really strong female heroine, check this one out. Also, I want to add, this is not very spicy. This is maybe like a 1 on the spice scale. Okay, next I have another book that I have not read yet, and that is Forest of Spirits by S.J. Sanders. This is the second book in this Dark Spirits series, but as far as I know, they're standalones. They can be read completely separately. And the synopsis says, never go into the forest alone. There are things that dwell in the woods. That's a perfect way to start off, like a spooky enchanted forest type of vibe. And our heroine's name is Diana, and she lives in a house like right on the edge of the woods, and she is very aware of the forest, very aware of its dangers. It looks like she might be the fated mate to the High King of the Eternal Forest. It looks like things are very complicated because humans' fate is like interwoven with the fate of the forest somehow. So it looks like there's like a higher plot to be had. We're talking about fates and bonds and mates and maybe a hate to love situation as well, and a dark malevolent forest. I'm very excited for this one. I like the cover. I love the like antler forest like being thing. That's the second book on this list that has that, and I really love it. Okay, next I have Green Little Vines by Britt Andrews. This is a sapphic novella about a girl that lives on a cottage. She lives in this cottage on the edge of the woods, and she plants her garden and basically takes care of herself. And one day she's lured into the woods by some being that's been watching her. She's felt this being watching her even when she's like in the garden. When she gets there, she's lured into this cottage, and there's this really nice attractive witch there. Let's just say things get super spicy. There are vines involved, very much magical forest witch and magical plant magic that is used in very seductive ways. Very high on the spice scale. If you're looking for a magical forest book that is sapphic and spicy, definitely don't miss out on this one. Finally, I have another sapphic erotica short for you, and that is Hunted by the Mushroom Nymphs by River Scaletta. This is definitely a very spooky and spicy forest short erotica about these mushroom nymphs that can grow mushrooms anywhere on and off their bodies. Why choose in a way? Maybe you could say poly. And this girl is very interested in the spore that she has found recently and somehow is pulled back to the forest to try to find more of this mushroom or spore. When she does, she is found by the mushroom nymphs in this enchanted section of the forest. And trigger warnings, there's a bit of gore in the beginning part. Yeah, it's very kind of weird, definitely weird erotica. So just be ready for that. But it definitely also totally packs in the enchanted cottagecore vibes. Okay, if you're okay with some weird erotica, maybe check this one out. Okay guys, that is it. Those are all of the Enchanted Forest magical romantasy books that I have to recommend to you today. Don't forget to click the like button if you like this video, subscribe if you want more content like this. All of my social media is down below in the description, including my Etsy shop and my Patreon. Oh, and if you want to drop a comment but don't know what to drop, maybe drop like a tree, any kind of tree. Until next time, fellow readers, keep reading and living your best life. This is about our heroine, a Dokiri drop.
Gravel road, I've been asked to slow down. Fireplace to